The survival experts on the show are incredibly skilled. Two women grabbed a stone and began striking it. They created a sharp stone shard and scraped pine branches. Heating the branches produced a sticky glue. They glued the stone shard to a wooden stick and secured it with a rope, creating a highly effective spear. This time, they aimed to hunt the fiercest black bear. It was the 13th day of the new season of the Wilderness Survival Show. Early this morning, the crew came to them with shocking news. Last night, they had heard unusual sounds while in their shelter. There was a helicopter flying overhead, seemingly searching for something, and they could also hear dogs barking. This was the snowy wilderness. Why were there helicopters and dogs? No one knew what was happening, and then they heard sirens. What had happened nearby? The crew soon revealed the answer. A grizzly bear had killed a local man the previous night. Hearing this terrified Jamie. With evacuation day tomorrow, the crew urged them to craft hunting tools for safety. Wes and the others were alarmed. The grizzly bear incident had happened just a kilometer away from them. The crew shared some details and instructed them to gather for evacuation tomorrow. Jack knew a lot about bear behavior. Bears dislike human disturbances. Jeremy's group, the weakest, included an elderly woman. They should pray before heading out tomorrow. Gary and Kai, the two women, were not afraid at all. Grizzly bears are massive. They stand much taller than humans and run faster too. If it came to a fight, humans would surely be devoured by the grizzly. Gary and Kai needed to prepare for tomorrow's evacuation. They planned to make weapons to hunt the black bear, leading to the scene at the beginning of the video where the two women crafted weapons. They kept striking the stone until they got a sharp shard, then fixed it onto a stick to make a spear. In the primitive Stone Age, people used such weapons for hunting. Kai and Gary were indeed skilled and brave enough to hunt a grizzly bear. Jermaine and Sarah set out to gather food, aiming for a hearty meal before tomorrow's evacuation. They needed a good meal to have the strength to face the grizzly. Sarah had earlier made a fish trap and set it in a stream for crayfish, but they hadn't caught any crayfish yet. Jermaine found some wild berries nearby, which were edible. Even a fly is meat. Wes went to the west to check the fish trap, hoping to catch some crayfish. In his last two challenges, Wes didn't reach evacuation day, but this time he did. Fortunately, the fish trap had some crayfish. Sarah pulled a crayfish out of the trap. They were quite big, but there were only two. The three of them were overjoyed, and Sarah started howling like crazy. Jeremy took Grandma to the west to fish, as they had been hungry for over 10 days. The young guy had turned into an old man. They saw a beaver swimming happily in the water. Jeremy remembered the traps he had set earlier. They went to check the beaver traps, hoping to catch one for a feast. Unfortunately, the traps failed again. They reset them, hoping to have roasted beaver tonight. "Beaver in the water, please come to our trap," they hoped aloud. Meanwhile, Jack and Boz searched nearby for food. Tomorrow is evacuation day, and they all want to eat well before setting off. They checked the squirrel traps. The stone had been triggered. Jack picked it up and found a small mouse underneath. They didn't want to eat such a tiny mouse, but they planned to use it as bait for fishing. Boz put the mouse in the fish trap, hoping to attract crayfish. Then they grabbed their bows and arrows to hunt rabbits. Animal bones were scattered all around, a sign of nearby predators. This place was like an animal graveyard. It was best to return before dark. Jeremy and Grandma went back to the fishing spot. Catching beavers was tough, so they depended on fishing. Without a catch, they'd go hungry overnight. They picked up the fishing rod. To their amazement, they caught a large fish. Grandma, starving, wanted to eat it raw. Instead, they roasted it on a stick. This was their second time having roasted fish. They alternated bites of fish with ice. Though small, the fish was tender and juicy. Having a roasted meal before leaving was a real blessing, but Jeremy still longed for beaver meat. Seeing the beaver swimming around, he wondered if it had a bulletproof vest. Sarah thought the two crayfish were a hard-earned catch, and she took all the credit. They boiled the crayfish in clean water. Sarah ate one herself. Wes and Jermaine split the other crayfish, devouring it like a roasted chicken leg. At least they had a decent meal before leaving. Jack and Boz returned to the shelter, but apart from catching a mouse today, they were still hungry. Jack's foot was rotting, but they could get treatment at home tomorrow. Naturally, the $100,000 mattered more than a toe. A doctor examined it, but couldn't they just clean and bandage it? Jack believed he could keep competing, but the doctor didn't agree. They planned to carry Jack out on the final day, thinking they could save the $100,000 prize. But Jack insisted he could continue, and Boz was willing to help him. They used the excuse of checking the crayfish traps and indeed caught two crayfish. I suspect the show arranged it. Why is it always two crayfish? They cooked them with wolf bones. Despite only having two, it was a feast before they left. Such a big piece of crayfish meat would surely fill them up. That night, a strong wind blew, and on their last night, They couldn't sleep well. Gary and Kai went hungry, and the wind was fierce. Wes stayed up all night again, shivering in the cold. Since Sarah and Jermaine were by the small fire, old Wes had to sleep alone. Vaz and his group were likely the most comfortable. Although the fire wasn't big, they had plenty of fur. On the morning of the 14th day, they woke up early. Jeremy and Grandma shivered quietly. At dawn, they got up, smeared charcoal on their faces, seemingly to show off. Gary and Kai stayed up all night, likely due to the cold and the anticipation of the $100,000 prize. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to sleep either. In the morning, the doctor came to check on Jack again. They were about to leave, so why check? Were they looking for an excuse to carry Jack out early? After the check, they found out that if the doctor had come a minute later, his toe might have healed. In the end, they couldn't find a reason, so they let Jack continue the competition. Wes and his group were making clothes from fur. It was the final day, and they were still making clothes. Everyone was prepared to head to the meeting point from their various locations. They had to be cautious of lions, deer, and bison attacks while following the map to the evacuation point. Each team had to walk over 10 kilometers, and the terrain they faced was different. The challenges they encountered varied. But with the lure of a $100,000 prize, these difficulties are nothing. They have to follow the river. Their toughest task is crossing the river. The ice is treacherous, and their fur shoes make slipping easy. Slipping is easy. While discussing it, Jack showed us firsthand. Luckily, nothing happened, but it felt really bad. As the saying goes, if you walk by the river often, your shoes will get wet. Wes's team is bundled up tightly today, ready for a bear attack. They're hungry but still happy. They need to cross the river, but there's no ice, just a log bridge. Jamie finds it tough to walk on. Without some wisdom, it's impossible to cross the log bridge. Soon, they all made it across the log bridge. This means they are wise. Gary and Kai found bear tracks on the road. Could they really encounter a bear? If that's the case, the stone spear they made will come in handy. Kai even wants to hunt a bear to eat. Jeremy and the old lady set off together. Their route is easier, though they still need to cross a river, but they found a log bridge. If they stay sharp, they can cross the log bridge, but they still need to climb a mountain after being hungry for over 10 days. On the last day, they faced the mountain again, and the old lady took off her shoes. She just wants Jeremy to carry her. It's a miracle Jeremy didn't kick her off. This old lady is quite ugly but has high hopes. Just a small hill exhausted her. Hurry up, once you get up there, you can get the prize. Sarah and her team are shouting as they walk, not afraid of bears at all. I know these types well. They act tough but are the first to cry if they really encounter a bear. Gary and Kai are hiking on a clear, easy path when Kai loses his balance and slips. Fur shoes make walking tough. Jeremy's team is still climbing for the $100,000 prize. Why is it so difficult for them? But once they get the $100,000, Jeremy can marry old lady Tracy. Wes's team and Jeremy's team met up. They formed a 5-person team and continued forward. Vaz and Jack also met up with Gary and Kai, forming a 4-person team. It's safer to walk in a group. They walked along the river for a few hours. The old lady started feeling very tired, lagging behind the group. Gary's team didn't feel the same and soon caught up with them. They came across the other team's vehicle. I can't figure out why they arrived together, but it was clearly staged for the show. Ultimately, they conquered the 14-day survival challenge in the snowy mountains, each winning $100,000. This was their hardest period. Today marks their hard-earned victory, concluding this season. Can't wait for the next one.